Phobias are irrational fears that come in many forms, from classic popular ones like fear of clowns, to very specific ones like the fear of the number 4. Let's take a look at which phobia fits each killer the best. The Trapper's power is all about making you lose control of your survivor if you accidentally step into a bear trap, and this situation is extremely scary for people that suffer from Cleitropophobia, the fear of being trapped, fitting for a character called the Trapper after all. Now don't get it confused with Claustrophobia, which is the fear of enclosed spaces themselves, whereas Cleitropophobia is the fear of being trapped, regardless of where, and it can manifest on, for example, putting on the seatbelt in your car or putting the harness on an attraction. The Wraith has a lot of factors that could trigger various phobias. The fact that he is a supernatural invisible entity, the fact that he could be stalking you without you knowing, but the one that he can only trigger is an extremely niche phobia not many of you probably know exists. Kampanaphobia, the fear of bells. And to be fair, being scared of this bell would be more than justified, since Wraith uses it as a warning that danger is coming and you should start running. Chainsaws are really scary for a lot of people due to how dangerous they can be and also how popular they are in horror media. However, while there is no phobia specifically for chainsaws themselves, both Hillbilly and Leatherface can trigger another one thanks to this chainsaw, and that is Phonophobia, the fear of intense noises. So for people suffering from this phobia, it's not just the intense fear of being chased by a chainsaw wielding maniac, as just hearing the chainsaw from afar would be enough to give them intense anxiety, which would only be amplified once Hillbilly or Leatherface are near you. Another very popular thing represented in a lot of horror is everything related to medicine, hospitals, doctors, nurses, and that is why I think that the nurse and the doctor fit nosocomephobia, the intense fear of hospitals and everything related to it, especially fitting for nurse, as her outfit is more looking like the traditional classic nurse, only scarier. For people with this phobia, maps like Larry's and Disturbed World are also very scary, and in real life this is a severe phobia that can cause people to neglect their health because of the fear of going inside a hospital. Do you always feel like somebody's watching you? Are you scared of someone just staring while you are outside? Or how about someone looking at you right now? Then you have Scopophobia, the intense fear of being watched or stared at, which is triggered intensely by both Myers and Ghostface, as their power is literally based all around looking at survivors while they are hidden. I think Ghostface is even scarier for this, because Myers stalks you just for the fun of it, but the Ghostface is doing professional stalking, just so he can learn your weaknesses so he can later break inside your home. Perhaps from this entire video, this is the most niche phobia out of all of them, as the rest can be explained rationally, but Ososphobia, the fear of cannibalism and triggered by Hag, Cannibal and the Ghoul, is extremely rare, as cannibalism is already very rare in real life, only existing in certain cultures that probably are very foreign to my average viewer or found in severely disturbed individuals. However, this phobia makes sense, as the majority of people would not want to be eaten alive, as they would rather just die. The Doctor is one of the worst killers to find against if you are stuck in the fog because of his manipulation powers that make you hallucinate and fear even your shadow. But for some people, it is not the manipulation that they are scared of, but the means to achieve it, the electricity of the Doctor. This is where Electrophobia comes in, exclusive to him, which is the deep fear of electricity in all forms. This fear can manifest in many ways. For example, being scared of sockets when plugging in a charger and seeing the sparks fly out. So imagine getting fully electrocuted by a maniac while trying to escape him. Now that's scary. When you think of the Huntress, you might find a tall lady that can lob hatchets at you from anywhere very scary. But for people that suffer from Lagophobia, it is her bunny mask that they fear the most. This sounds like a ridiculous fear to have, as rabbits are harmless unless they have rabies or unless you are in the Monty Python universe. but this is a phobia that surprised me on how much it is represented in media. Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer has this phobia, as she is very scared of rabbits overall, and even Kevin Hart has this phobia himself. Somniphobia is the fear of everything related to the act of sleeping, and in a world where Freddy Krueger is real, this is no longer irrational, as sleeping poses a real danger. Now in real life, this is a very dangerous and bad phobia to have, as all humans require some form of rest. So being anxious each time bedtime comes in sounds indeed like living a literal nightmare. But if you saw what Quentin did himself, you would start developing this phobia yourself. This is the only phobia in this entire video where I think a survivor genuinely has it, as in-game, Quentin Smith tries with all his might to avoid sleeping in order to not see Freddy again. Just like the Huntress, the pig can be an insane trigger for another animal-related phobia, specifically Swinophobia, the fear of pigs, which is even more intensified in Halloween, where some people might dress up as a butcher with a pig's head. But in the case of Amanda, her pig head is actually a real rotting swine head, complete with the creepy wig and the intense smell, so she would be a nightmare to face if you have this phobia. As a fun fact, Orlando Bloom, famous for portraying Legolas and Will Turner, suffers from this phobia. The fear of clowns is, along with the fear of spiders, one of the most popular and well-known phobias out of all of them, and in Dead by Daylight, this is obviously represented with the fact that the clown himself has a perk named like this fear, Coulrophobia. Now something funny about Clown is that his default is not that representative of the classic fear of clowns people have, because his clothing is based on a ringmaster and he is lacking a lot of characteristics that clowns have. I think that these cosmetics trigger this phobia more than his default, which is a very interesting case for this killer, and I wonder why the devs designed him that way. And another phobia that is extremely common in a lot of people, to the point they even made a game named after it, is Phasmophobia, the fear of ghosts, spirits and the like, which would fit with characters like Spirit and Sadako, as both of them are creepy, hatred-filled spirits that will chase you down. Obviously, a ghost as a concept is scary already, but people with this phobia will be scared of abandoned buildings or just going on a walk during the night in fear of encountering these ghosts. Or maybe if they hear a sound in their home and they don't know what caused it. It is an extreme version of the normal fear and anxiety a human would feel if they suspect a spirit is messing with them. The Legion could trigger various fears in a lot of people in the context of Dead by Daylight, but by design, they are one of the most realistic depictions of actual real-life killers, as there is nothing supernatural or exaggerated about them. They are criminals, and anyone with Scelerophobia, the fear of crimes, would be severely impacted by them. Usually, this phobia exists as a trauma response after being robbed inside your house or your work, and this is something that the Legion could easily partake in. It's really interesting to think that in a hypothetical situation where you are inside the fog, for some people, the Legion, which are arguably one of the least scary characters in the game, would be the scariest by far due to this phobia. Now, Xenophobia might be one of the most common phobias in the entire world, or at least that's what I think every time I enter Twitter. But I am talking about the real definition of the word, the fear of the unknown. Whether that is actual unknown as a concept, a strange being from another universe, or an alien from outer space. Basically, any monster or being not from planet Earth would trigger this phobia. Blood is very common in horror media, and it's everywhere in Dead by Daylight 2, as you can even dress up on it. But only two killers use this as part of their power, and those are the Oni and the Ghoul, as both absorb it to become stronger. So if you have Hemophobia, the fear of blood, and don't be confused with the other one, you won't want to meet these killers, as one of them will create bubbles out of it that float around you while you are injured, and the other will slurp it up like a thirsty cat who just got their bowl filled. Weapons are scary by design. A tool created purely to cause harm and death would easily cause anxiety on anyone near one. But some people suffer from Hoplophobia, the intense fear of firearms, and they cannot even see or be near one gun without suffering from this anxiety. So imagine being stuck in the fog, being chased by all these maniacs, when suddenly you hear the sound of a gun firing. Killers can have guns now? Now that's messed up, and for now, only triggered by the Dead Slinger. Another very popular phobia that is triggered in Dead by Daylight is the fear of needles and injections, something that the Blight is constantly doing on himself, and especially intense during the Memento Mori, where he injects survivors with a needle 2 times. And if you are a survivor that suffers from this phobia, you are in a severe disadvantage, because the syringe is one of the best, if not the best add-on a medkit can have. So if you want to survive the fog, you better get rid of this phobia faster than that one content creator making the video of triple sprint burst value. Fans of the channel will know the one dedicated to the plague, as this is one of the only phobias I have actually put warnings on my videos for, and that is emetophobia, the fear of anything related to vomiting, whether that is the act, the smells, or the sound. Players with this phobia will have to play against Plague on mute and with filters, just so it's not an uncomfortable experience for them. And unlike the vast majority of phobias in this video, this is one that Dead by Daylight itself could trigger, as you don't have to live inside the world of Dead by Daylight to get affected by it, because just by hearing Plague puke, that's enough to trigger it. Before you think about it, I am not going to say Francophobia, the fear, but in most contexts, hatred of French people. Instead, for the twins, I chose Pedophobia, which is the fear of babies and children, something that was very well done in Resident Evil Village, and it's all because of Victor, who despite legally not being a child for the sake of game rating, he does have all the features of a child, which are high-pitched screams, short stature, and now on top of that, this is an insanely fast child that can also actually kill you, like the majority of children. Considering how the twins were originally pitched as a woman that was pregnant with her baby, this phobia could have been much worse. The Trickster might have the most interesting type of phobia in this entire video, because it was part of one of his balance changes. Have you ever wondered why the Trickster has 44 blades by default? That is because of Tetraphobia, the fear of the number 4, which might be confusing for Westerners, but this number is the equivalent of the number 13 for Asians, and the reason why that is the case is because the number 4 sounds almost the same as the word death. This is not even a niche phobia, as a lot of buildings skip the 4th floor with the 5th, and a lot of people don't want a lot of 4s in their phone number. For Nemesis, you might have expected Necrophobia, the fear of the dead, as he has 2 zombie helpers to come attack you on top of being a scary monster himself. But to my surprise, I actually found that there is a phobia specifically for zombies, and that is Kinemortophobia, the fear of the living dead. But that's just one aspect of the Nemesis power, as his other power is hitting you with a tentacle to infect you with a virus, and this is a nightmare scenario for anyone with Mesophobia, also known as Germophobia, the fear of anything germ and infection related, something you might be familiar with if you played God of War, as Sindri has this phobia. Just like Nemesis, Wesker can also trigger it, as he is also grabbing you completely while infecting you, something a germaphobe would absolutely despise. I am not going to pretend at all there was no fear specific for both Pyramid Head and the Knight that I could find, as they have nothing about them to be scared of specifically for a phobia. There is no fear of metal, nor any fear of knights that is officially medically recognized. However, there was one salvation, the scapegoat for the vast majority of killers, Aichmophobia, the fear of sharp objects like needles, knives, or sharp weapons. And what both of these killers have in common? A gigantic weapon that could cleave you in half just with one swipe. Aichmophobia works even better for Pyramid Head, as he leaves trails full of razors and razor wires that I am almost sure passing through is not a comfortable experience for survivors. These Cenobites are amazing at one job, and that is inflicting the maximum amount of pain possible, to the point it becomes pleasure, something that some people might end up enjoying, But for people with Algophobia, the intense fear of pain, this is actually the worst possible character to meet. Almost everyone hates pain, but people that suffer from this phobia will be very scared of it, to the point they might not cook because they are scared of cutting themselves, or where they might straight up not do any sport in fear of breaking a bone. It might be just me, but I always found the artist to be one of the creepiest killers in the game in terms of movement, triggering my uncanny valley a lot. But for other people, what they find scary is her projectiles, and something that you can find in every single map, Ornitophobia, the fear of birds, which in Dead by Daylight would be crows and the vultures of Dead Dog Saloon. Now usually, this fear is for specific types of birds, and not all of them. So for example, some people might fear pigeons, but not chickens. Crows, however, have always had a negative connotation to them, either being watchers for Odin in Norse mythology, or being iconic with horror media like black cats, the reason why these animals are representative of the entity. The concept of the dredge is entirely based around fear, and all of the cosmetics it has are representative of traumas that it stole from the minds of its victims. But one thing that dredge has in common, no matter the cosmetic you wear, is how connected it is to darkness and night, how it hides in lockers to ambush you, and how it engulfs the entire map in darkness. And that is why this killer is best represented by Nyctophobia, the fear of the dark, an incredibly common phobia that many of us have had during our childhood, and some might even have in their adulthood. This is a primal fear, as it is needed for evolutionary purposes, considering how the majority of predators use the darkness to hunt. As of the release of this video, Skull Merchant and Singularity are the only ones that use technology in order to hunt survivors down, so for them, the phobia I think represents them best is Technophobia, the fear of advanced technology, a very annoying phobia to have in this current day and age, and most likely something that you don't have since you're watching this video. What is also interesting about these two is that both use human organic matter on their tech, as Scully uses human skulls for the drones and Singularity uses human biomass for the biopods. That makes this technology even creepier than a smartphone. The fear of dolls is yet another incredibly common fear found in many children and even some adults due to the uncanny valley effect that some dolls have, or the fear that they might be moving while you are not looking. Chucky is a direct trigger of this, which is called Pediophobia, and it's the name of the fear many viewers feel when thinking about him. But Chucky is not the only horror character that triggers it, as Annabelle is another incredibly popular character that does, but I doubt we will see her in Dead by Daylight. Vecna himself is so powerful that I am sure inside the world of Dungeons and Dragons, he is a fear himself. But since I am talking about real life, medically recognized phobias, and since magic doesn't exist, I chose Necrophobia for him for various reasons. He is literally a lich, which is a reanimated corpse, already incredibly scary by concept, but then he also has skeletons that he can command to do his bidding, yet another trigger. So we have both the meat and the bones. While watching the Hemophobia part, you might have been surprised as to why I didn't put Dracula, a vampire all based around sucking blood, on it. Well, that's because in the game, he doesn't actually drink any blood outside of the Mori, but what he does is something I was shocked to learn that it took the devs so much time to add: a killer with a fire-based power, a trigger for people suffering from Pyrophobia, the fear of fire. Fire has always been a primal fear for a lot of people, and to this day, it is used as the means of punishment in a lot of religious hells. I am in fact surprised that Dead by Daylight, to this day, has no pyromaniac as a killer, since that trope is so popular. For the majority of people, dogs are the best friend of any human, but for some people that suffer from Xenophobia, they are spawns of Satan. Now, dogs are mostly presented as very caring animals, but Snug on the other hand is designed to be scary and intimidating. For people with this phobia, just hearing the sound Snug does while in search mode is already enough to scare them, and usually this phobia is born out of traumatic experiences with dogs during childhood. The animatronic is a really cool example of a character that actually popularized and made a specific fear very mainstream, as the entirety of Five Nights at Freddy's is all based on Masclophobia, the fear of mascots and animatronics, very common in children. This was not invented by FNAF, as people already found mascots like Chuck E. Cheese scary in the past, and Springtrap is an exaggerated version of it, as he is literally a killer, a rotting corpse inside the suit, designed to be scary. However, funnily enough, he would fit more the definition of a mascot killer, as he is not a robot, but instead an actual human inside the suit, so his fear would be similar to the one that people feel when looking at Robbie the Rabbit for the Legion and the two clown animal outfits. And finally, we got the Krasu, one of the visually scariest characters in the game, as she is a floating monster with organs dangling all around, a horrific concept that scared a lot of people that believe in Asian folklore. However, to my surprise, this killer added a new phobia to the game that is completely unrelated to her visual design, and is something that didn't even need to be part of her power. The mushrooms that she spawns around the map are actual potential triggers of mycophobia, the fear of fungus. A very bad thing to have if you're planning on playing The Last of Us, and it is, funnily enough, one of the rarest and most niche phobias that Dead by Daylight actually triggers fully, all for a part of a power that is not even explained lore-wise, so the mushrooms seem to be a completely random addition to her. Which phobia did you find the most curious? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to also like this video if you found it fun and learned something new. As always, a huge thanks to all my members for helping me make these kinds of wild videos. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.